Have you ever felt burdened by the weight of an injustice, that sense that the world is unfair, that you must take charge to fix everything? It can overwhelm us. But today I want to share something that will shift your viewpoint. You don't have to bear it alone. God, the perfect judge, already has the plan in place. Release it and let it go. No matter how severe the wound or deep the injustice, God not only sees your suffering but is ready to act. Stay with me, because today you'll learn how trusting Him can bring peace to your soul, and how letting God handle justice will completely transform your life. Before we begin, I want you to declare a powerful statement of faith. Go to the comments right now and write, "I have a great victory from God in my life. Amen." By proclaiming this, you are activating your faith and preparing your heart to receive what God has for you. Don't think about it any longer. Declare your victory now. Romans 12:19. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, "It is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord." This verse serves as a powerful reminder that we are not meant to bear the burden of vengeance. It frees us from the emotional weight of responding to harm with more harm, and invites us to trust in the perfect justice of God, who sees and knows everything. Do not avenge yourselves, my beloved. These words urge us to control our natural reactions. When we are hurt or treated unfairly, we want to restore balance, to reclaim what we feel has been taken from us. But this verse tells us that this is not our job. Instead, we are called to trust in God. Letting go is not a sign of weakness. It's an act of faith. It's acknowledging that God is in charge and that His justice is flawless. Making room for God's wrath reveals a liberating truth. We don't need to be the judge or the executioner. When we leave room for His wrath, we recognize that He alone has the authority to handle every situation justly. Our perspective will always be limited, but God sees everything, even the hidden motives of the heart. Leaving space for His anger does not mean wishing harm on others, but trusting that God will act according to His divine justice, not our emotions. For it is written, "Vengeance is mine." This is the ultimate reminder that vengeance belongs to God alone. He does not forget, ignore, or overlook injustice. Yet His way of dealing with it is always guided by His infinite wisdom and love. When we seek revenge on our own, we act out of our emotions, often making things worse. God, however, has the power to bring true justice and restoration. "I will repay," says the Lord. These words are a promise. When we choose not to take revenge, we are not abandoning our cause or accepting injustice. On the contrary, we are trusting that God will do what is right at the right time. This promise also prompts us to reflect on our own need for grace. We've all fallen short at times, and just as we expect God to be merciful with us, we must be ready to let go of our desire to punish others. This verse speaks not only about surrendering vengeance, but also about how to deal with the pain others cause us. It's not always easy to forgive or trust that God will handle it, but doing so frees us from the bitterness and burden of carrying grudges. Resentment doesn't harm the other person, it harms us. When we trust God to act, we find peace because we stop depending on our own strength and rest in His righteousness. Moreover, this passage calls us to reflect Christ's character. Jesus, during His time on earth, faced betrayal, rejection, and injustice, yet He never sought revenge. Instead, even on the cross, He asked God to forgive those who crucified Him. By following His example, we can show the same love and compassion, even toward those who have wronged us, knowing that God has the final word. If you're struggling with the urge to get even or take justice into your own hands, hear these words. "Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord." Trust that God is at work even when you don't see it. His justice never fails, and His timing is perfect. Release the burden of vengeance into His hands and let Him act. This decision to let go of revenge and trust God not only frees others, but it also frees you It frees you to live in peace, to walk in forgiveness, and to focus on what truly matters. Don't waste your energy on plans of retribution. Trust the God who loves you and promises to defend you. He knows exactly what to do and when to do it, and His justice is always better than we can imagine. Let go, trust, and live in the freedom that only He can provide. Exodus 14:14, the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. This verse invites us to rest in the certainty that we are not alone in life's battles. It is a powerful reminder that God is not just with us, but that He also fights on our behalf. Even when it seems all hope is lost, these words, spoken at a pivotal moment for the Israelites, still hold great significance today. The Lord will fight for you is a declaration of God's power and sovereignty. No matter how overwhelming the challenge or how formidable the opposition may seem, God is committed to fighting for His children. He is not a mere observer of our struggles. He is a warrior who takes control of the battle. When we try to fight on our own, we often feel worn out, frustrated, and helpless. But this verse reminds us that we were never meant to carry everything. God invites us to lay down our weapons and let Him fight for us. You need only to be still teaches us a crucial lesson: calmness. This doesn't mean we are passive or ignore our problems, but rather that we learn to fully trust God. In this particular context, the Israelites were trapped between Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea with no way out. From their perspective, escape was impossible. Yet God told them to remain calm and trust in Him. This stillness isn't inaction, it's an act of faith. It's knowing that even if we can't see the solution, God is already working on our behalf. This passage challenges us to shift our perspective on the battles we face. Often, our initial response is to try to control the situation, look for quick fixes, or give in to anxiety. But here, God shows us a different path. Trust, rest, and let Him take the lead. This doesn't mean everything will be easy or instantaneous, but it guarantees that victory is assured when God is at the forefront. The Lord will fight for you. Also reminds us that battles are not always won in the way we expect. For the Israelites, victory didn't come through swords or military force, but through the supernatural power of God parting the Red Sea. This teaches us that God's way of fighting for us is unique and perfect. His strategy is always the best, even when we don't fully understand it. This verse also encourages us to trust in God's timing. We may want quick results, but God works in His perfect time. Meanwhile, He calls us to remain still, rest in His promises, and strengthen our faith. Calmness is not passive. It's an active choice to trust that God is in control. When we face our own Red Sea moments, it's easy to focus on the problem instead of the God who can solve it. This verse calls us to lift our eyes and remember that the same God who fought for Israel continues to fight for us today. He doesn't change. His power is limitless, and His commitment to us is eternal. If you feel you are in the midst of an impossible battle, remember these words: the Lord will fight for you, and you need only to be still. You don't need all the answers or solutions, just trust that God is with you, and He has never lost a battle. His power is more than sufficient. His love is unshakable, and His victory is assured. God not only promises to fight for you, but to give you peace through the process. His plan is always good, even when the road ahead is uncertain, so let go of fear, anxiety, and control. Surrender your battles to God, trust He is working for you, and let His peace fill your heart. When He fights, victory is not only possible but inevitable. Deuteronomy 32-35. It is mine to avenge, I will repay, in due time their foot will slip. Their day of disaster is near, and their doom rushes upon them. This verse is a profound statement about divine justice and vengeance. It reminds us that, while we may be tempted to seek justice on our own, retribution belongs solely to God. He sees everything, knows everything, and in His perfect timing, He will administer justice absolutely and fairly. Mine is vengeance and justice. These words challenge us to release our need for revenge and surrender everything to God. Human justice is often flawed by errors, biased judgments, and lack of impartiality. However, God's justice is flawless and just. When He says that vengeance is His, He invites us to trust in His power and wisdom, knowing that He alone can act at the right moment. We must not carry anger or seek to repay evil with evil. God calls us to let go of that burden and trust that He is in control of everything. In His time, their foot will slip. This reminds us that we are not called to rush justice or lose hope when it seems that wrongdoers go unpunished. God has an appointed time for everything, and His timing is perfect. Even when it seems that the wicked are prospering, God assures us that, in due time, justice will prevail. Nothing escapes His sight, and everything done in secrecy will be revealed at the right time. This phrase calls us to be patient and trust that God does not forget the injustices done against us, for the day of their calamity is near, and what is prepared for them hastens. Here, God assures us that justice will manifest sooner than we expect. The day of their calamity is not a sudden punishment, but the natural outcome of their wrongful actions. At times, it may appear that people escape the consequences of their bad decisions, but this verse reminds us that there is nothing beyond God's sight, and nothing will be overlooked. The consequences of wrongful actions will eventually reach those who have acted unjustly, and the day of retribution will not be delayed. This serves as a warning not only for those who commit evil, but also for those who feel as though injustice is prevailing. God's justice moves swiftly and comes at the perfect time. This verse also teaches us patience and faith in God's process. As human beings, we often desire immediate results and quick answers, especially when we face injustice. But God calls us to trust that He is in complete control, knowing the perfect moment to act. His justice will always be more righteous and fitting than ours. This invites us to rest in the certainty that God is just, and that, even if we do not understand His timing, He will always work what is right. God's retribution is not merely a punishment, it is also an act of restoration. While the wrongs of others may cause us pain, God's justice for us is not just about punishing wrongdoers, but about restoring order and peace to our lives. By trusting that God will take care of what is owed to us, we can free ourselves from bitterness, knowing that He will do it far better than we could ever manage. This verse also challenges us not to take justice into our own hands. The temptation for revenge is natural, especially when we feel hurt. But this passage reminds us that by doing so, we are not only stepping outside of God's plan, but we may also worsen the situation. By surrendering our wounds and the injustices we face to God, we are trusting in His sovereignty and acknowledging that He is the only one capable of fully restoring what has been broken. If today you are going through a situation where you feel wronged or witness injustice around you, remember this verse. Mine is vengeance and retribution. Stop carrying the weight of anger and trust that God has everything under control. He will handle justice in His perfect timing. We don't need to fight our battles alone. God is by your side, and He will bring the righteousness you need. Trust in His timing, His plan, and His perfect retribution. Psalm 37:7. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. This verse is an invitation to place our full trust in God and to rest in His perfect timing. Even when we face injustice or see those who act wrongly prosper, it serves as a reminder that our peace should not be dependent on our surroundings, but on our relationship with God. Be still before the Lord. These words guide us to adopt an attitude of reverence and trust. Remaining still does not mean passivity or resignation, but rather a willingness to listen, hope, and submit to God's will. Often our first reactions to difficulties are complaints, anxiety, or attempts to fix things ourselves, but this passage calls us to pause, calm our emotions, and allow God to take control. To be still before Him is an act of faith, demonstrating our complete reliance on His power and wisdom. Waiting on God can be one of the hardest tests of faith. We live in a world that values immediacy, but God operates according to His perfect timing. This verse reminds us that waiting is not inactivity, it is a time of preparation, growth, and trust. By waiting on God, we declare that we believe in His plan even when we do not understand the process. It is during this waiting that God strengthens our character, teaches us to trust, and shows us that His timing is always best. Do not fret because of those who prosper in their way, because of the man who carries out evil schemes. One of the greatest temptations we face is comparing ourselves to others, especially those who seem to prosper while doing wrong. This passage calls us not to fall into the trap of envy or frustration. While it may appear that the wicked are succeeding, their success is fleeting. God sees what we cannot, and His justice will prevail at the right time. Rather than focusing on what others have or do, we should look to God and trust that He is working, even when we cannot see Him. For the man who does evil, this part of the verse reminds us that the actions of the wicked do not go unnoticed by God. Although it may seem at times that those who act unjustly prosper without consequence, this verse assures us that God is aware of everything. He is not only a witness to their actions, but He also has a plan to address them according to His perfect righteousness. This frees us from the burden of worrying about how or when justice will be done, as we can trust that God will handle it in His time. This verse also teaches us to live with an eternal perspective. The apparent advantages of the wrongdoers are temporary. What truly matters is our relationship with God and our faithfulness to His will. By being still before Him and waiting patiently, we build a strong foundation for our lives, one that is not shaken by external circumstances or by the actions of others. Being still before the Lord and trusting in Him calls us to practice patience and active trust. It is not easy to remain calm when we face injustice, or when it seems that evil is winning. But this command encourages us not to be swept away by our emotions. God asks us to surrender our burdens to Him, trust in His justice, and allow Him to act in His own way. If you feel discouraged today because you see others prospering despite their wrongdoing, remember this verse. God calls you to stop worrying about what others are doing and focus on your relationship with Him. Be still, wait on Him, and trust in His perfect righteousness. Even if you don't see the outcome now, God is working on your behalf. He will give you peace, sustain you, and take care of everything in His perfect timing. Instead of worrying or getting upset, let this verse be a constant reminder that God is in control no matter what things look like around you. His righteousness will prevail. Be still, wait on Him, and trust, for God never fails. He has a plan for you, and that plan is good. Isaiah 41:10. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. This verse is one of the most powerful promises in the Bible, a direct statement of God's commitment to His people. In it, we find comfort, strength, and security, reminding us that no matter how great our struggles may be, God is with us, ready to help and support us. Do not fear, for I am with you. These words serve as a balm in the midst of fear and uncertainty. Fear is a natural response to the unknown or to situations that seem beyond our control, but here God gives us a reason to release that fear. His presence is with us in our battles, and His promise to be with us is a constant reminder that, even in the face of great challenges, His power and love are with us at all times. Do not be dismayed. For I am your God who strengthens you. To be dismayed is to feel overwhelmed, as though our strength is gone and hope has faded. But God tells us not to fall into discouragement, because He Himself will provide the strength we need. He does not expect us to face our struggles on our own. His power is available to renew our strength when we feel we can't go on. It is an invitation to stop relying on ourselves and to trust in His boundless power. I will always help you. This word "always" is key. It is not a temporary promise or limited to specific situations. God assures that He will be there to help us in every circumstance, at every moment, regardless of how great or small the challenge. His help does not depend on our merit or effort, but on His unconditional love and faithfulness. Knowing that His help is always available gives us peace and confidence to face any difficulty. I will always sustain you with the right hand of my righteousness. God not only promises to help us, but also to uphold us. This means that He supports us, keeps us steady, and guides us on the right path. The right hand of His righteousness symbolizes His power, authority, and faithfulness to fulfill His promises. When we feel the ground shaking beneath us, we can trust that God sustains us with His strong, sure hand, preventing us from falling. This verse also invites us to reflect on our relationship with God. We often try to bear our burdens alone, relying on our own strength and abilities. But here God reminds us that we were not meant to face life on our own. He is willing and ready to help us, strengthen us, and guide us. Our role is to trust Him, release our anxieties, and allow Him to be our refuge and strength. Our security does not depend on external circumstances, but on God's presence. Even when facing storms, sickness, loss, or uncertainty, we can rest assured because He is with us. His promise to help and sustain us is not based on what we see or feel, but on His unchanging character and eternal love. If today you find yourself facing challenges that seem insurmountable, this verse is for you. God says to you, "Do not fear, for I am with you." He is not distant or indifferent. He is present, active, and committed to you. No matter how dark the path may seem, His light is always with you, guiding you and strengthening you every step of the way. When you feel weak, remember these words: I am your God who strengthens you. You are not fighting alone. He upholds you, helps you, and gives you the strength to continue. His right hand of justice never fails, and His love for you is greater than any problem you face. Trust Him, for His promise is certain, and His faithfulness is eternal. God not only invites you to stop fearing, but also to walk with confidence and hope, knowing that He is the one fighting your battles. Hold on to this truth. No matter what comes, He is with you, helping you, strengthening you, and holding you with His just hand. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Trust, because with God by your side there is nothing to fear. Proverbs 20:22. Do not say, "I will avenge myself." Wait for the Lord, and He will save you. This verse is a direct invitation to trust in God's justice and to let go of any impulse for revenge. In a world where injustices seem to be endless and the desire to take matters into our own hands can be tempting, this passage calls us to a different path, a path of faith, patience, and total dependence on God. Do not say, "I will take revenge." These words confront a natural human reaction. When we are hurt or treated unjustly, our immediate instinct is to seek revenge, to return harm and balance the scales ourselves. But here, we are reminded that it is not our place to take justice into our hands. Doing so can not only escalate the situation, but also prevent us from trusting God's plan. He calls us to release resentment, not to be consumed by the urge for revenge, and to let His righteousness prevail. Wait for the Lord. This is the heart of the verse. A call to active patience and full trust. Waiting does not mean being passive, but rather believing that God is working even when we do not see Him. In waiting, We learn to depend on Him and rest in His faithfulness. It is an act of faith, recognizing that God knows what is best for us and that His justice is perfect, unlike ours, which is often influenced by emotions and limitations. He will save you. This promise assures us that God will not only fight our battles, but will also protect us and deliver us from the consequences of evil. His salvation does not always come in the way or timing we expect, but it always comes perfectly. By entrusting our burdens and struggles to Him, we experience His power and grace in ways we could never achieve on our own. He does not ignore our pain or struggles. He sees them and is working on our behalf. This verse also teaches us to reflect on the freedom that comes from trusting God. The desire for revenge can be a heavy burden that consumes us emotionally and spiritually. When we choose to wait for the Lord, we release that burden and allow Him to act in our place. This not only frees us from the weight of bitterness, but also opens us up to experience the peace and restoration that only God can offer. Additionally, this passage challenges us to live according to God's character. He is a God of justice, but also of mercy. Just as we expect His mercy for our mistakes, we must extend that same grace to others. This does not mean ignoring injustice, but trusting that God will handle it in the best way possible. When He says, He will save you, it also reminds us that God's work is not limited to punishing the wicked. His work includes restoring us, strengthening our faith, and guiding us through our difficulties. His salvation is holistic. It reaches not just our external circumstances, but also our hearts. He wants us to experience His peace even in the midst of trials. If you are facing a situation today where you feel tempted to take revenge or act on your own sense of justice, remember this verse. God calls you to let go of that desire, to hope in Him, and to trust that His justice will prevail. Although it may seem difficult, this decision is not weakness, but rather an act of faith, mercy, and obedience that opens the door for God to act powerfully in your life. Ultimately, trusting God with our battles not only frees us, but also allows us to see His hand at work in ways we could never imagine. His plan is perfect, His justice is eternal, and His love for us is unchanging. Wait on the Lord, and He will not only save you, but He will also give you peace, restoration, and hope in the midst of any adversity. Psalm 55:22, cast your burden on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never let the righteous fall. This verse is a powerful and comforting invitation to surrender our worries, anxieties, and problems to God. It reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles and that God is not only willing to help us, but also has the ability to sustain us in any circumstance. Cast your burden on the Lord. These words are a direct call to trust God with everything that weighs us down. Often we try to carry our burdens by ourselves, accumulating stress, worry, and exhaustion. But this passage urges us to let go of that weight and give it to God. Casting our burdens on Him is an act of faith, declaring that we trust and believe He has the power and desire to help us, no matter how large or small the burden. God invites us to give it to Him completely, and He will sustain you. Here, we find the promise that God not only takes our burdens, but also sustains us through our trials. His sustaining power is not temporary or conditional. It is constant and sufficient. When we feel weak, He is our strength. When we don't know how to go forward, He gives us the courage and energy to keep going. His sustenance does not mean He will avoid all difficulties, but rather that He will give us the strength to face them with faith and hope. He will not let the righteous fall forever. This is a reminder of God's faithfulness to those who trust in Him. Even if we face moments of weakness, failure, or difficulty, God will not allow us to stay in that state forever. His plan is to lift us up, restore us, and carry us forward. Justice here does not mean perfection, but rather a relationship with God based on faith and trust. He sees our struggles and promises to be with us every step of the way, ensuring that the end of our story is one of victory. This verse teaches us that life will not always be easy, But we are not called to bear our burdens alone. God is always available to us, ready to take our worries and give us peace in return. This challenges us to reflect on how many times we've tried to handle our burdens alone when we could have turned them over to God from the beginning. Casting our burden on the Lord also involves humility, recognizing that we can't do it all by ourselves. It's the first step to experiencing His help. It's not about being self-sufficient, but about relying on a God who is infinitely willing to help us. In doing so, we find not only relief, but also a new level of confidence in His love and power. When God promises to sustain us, it does not mean that we will not face challenges, but that His presence will give us the strength to overcome them. His sustenance includes peace in the midst of the storm, strength in our weakness, and hope when everything seems lost. He reminds us that, although problems may seem overwhelming, His power is greater. If you feel weighed down by problems today, listen to these words: cast your burden on Jehovah. You don't have to do it all yourself. Only God is with you, ready to help you, sustain you, and lift you up when you need it. His promise of sustenance is a guarantee that you will never be alone, no matter what you face. This verse also challenges us to adopt an eternal perspective. The burdens we carry now are temporary, but God's care is eternal. By giving Him our burdens, we are choosing to trust that He has a good and perfect plan for us, even when we can't see it clearly. God not only wants to ease your burden, but also to give you a life full of peace, strength, and purpose. Give Him what weighs you down, trust in His care, and allow Him to sustain you. His faithfulness never fails, and His promise to not leave the righteous fallen is a truth you can rest in. With Him, there is always hope, there is always strength, and there is always a way forward. Isaiah 54:17. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and you shall condemn every tongue that rises up against you in judgment. This is the inheritance of the servants of the Lord, and their salvation from me will come, says Jehovah. This verse is a declaration of victory and divine protection, assuring God's children that there is no force in this world that can defeat the purpose He has for their lives. It is a promise of security, justice, and salvation, inviting us to trust fully in God's power and faithfulness. No weapon forged against you will prosper. This part gives us absolute certainty. Even though weapons may be formed, they will not succeed. This does not mean we will not face challenges or attacks, but that none of them will be able to divert us from the perfect plan that God has for us. Weapons can come in the form of difficult problems, injustices, or adversities, but God promises that they will not have the power to destroy us. This statement fills us with confidence and strength, knowing that we are protected by God's shield. You shall condemn every tongue that rises up against you in judgment. The words of others can be powerful, especially when they are filled with criticism, accusations, or slander. But God assures us that no malicious tongue will prevail against His children. He not only protects us physically, but also shields us from unjust words and judgments raised against us. This promise invites us not to worry about what others say, because God's truth will always prevail. It is the inheritance of Jehovah's servants. This promise is not for just anyone. It is for those who walk with God, trust Him, and serve Him faithfully. It is a reminder that being a child of God comes with eternal benefits, including protection and divine joy. This inheritance is not something we can earn, but a gift that God gives to those who belong to Him. He assures us that, no matter what we face, we have a position of favor and protection before God. And their salvation from me will come, says Jehovah. Here is the final guarantee. Our salvation comes directly from God. It does not depend on our abilities, circumstances, or the people around us. God Himself is the one who acts on our behalf, who fights our battles, and who secures our victory. This invites us to rest in His power and trust that He is working even when we don't see it. This verse calls us to live with unwavering faith. Often, circumstances can cause us to doubt or fear, but this promise reminds us that nothing can thwart God's purpose for our lives. Even when challenges arise, they will not prosper. Even when criticism is thrown at us, it will not prevail. God is with us, ensuring that everything that comes against us will be defeated. It also teaches us about the importance of our identity as children of God. This protection and salvation are our inheritance not because of what we do, but because of who God is and who we are in Him. Living with this truth gives us the confidence to face any situation, knowing that we are not alone and that God is the one who fights for us. If today you are facing attacks, criticism, or challenges that seem insurmountable, remember this verse. God has promised that no weapon formed against you will succeed. His word is firm, and His protection is unwavering. No matter what others may plan or say, God has the final say, and His plan for you will prevail. This promise also calls us to action, to stand firm, trust God, and walk in faith, knowing that He is working on our behalf. His salvation not only protects us, but also gives us the strength and courage to move forward, even in the midst of adversity. With God on our side, there is nothing to fear because He has already secured our victory. Live with the confidence that your life is in God's hands. There is no weapon, word, or plan that can fight against you because He is your protector, your defender, and your Savior. His promise is eternal, and His faithfulness never fails. Trust in His word and walk with the assurance that with Him you are always on the side of victory. Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. These words of Jesus are a direct invitation to each of us, especially in a world where stress, anxiety, and exhaustion seem to be the norm. He calls us to let go of our burdens and stop trying to figure it all out on our own, so we can find in Him the rest and peace that we so desperately need. Come to me with this invitation. Jesus calls us to draw near to Him, no matter how we feel, no matter how heavy the emotional, physical, or spiritual baggage we carry. He is there with open arms, ready to receive us. This call has no conditions or restrictions. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to have all the answers. He simply says, come. It is a reminder that, in the midst of our struggle, we are not alone. There is someone waiting for us, willing to share our burdens. All you who labor and are heavy laden, Jesus does not ignore our struggles or minimize our pain. He recognizes that we live in a world that demands so much of us that we often feel exhausted by the responsibilities, worries, and problems we face. This verse assures us that our burdens are not insignificant to God. What we carry in our hearts, what weighs us down, what keeps us awake at night, all of it matters to Him. He sees every tear, every sigh, and every effort, and calls us to give it to Him. And I will give you rest. Here is the promise that changes everything. Jesus not only invites us to come to Him, but assures us that in doing so, we will find rest. This rest is not merely physical, it is a deep spiritual rest that reaches the core of our being. It's a peace that the world cannot offer, a peace of mind that comes from knowing that our burdens are in the hands of someone infinitely capable. When He says, I will give you rest, He's declaring that He has the power to ease our souls and give us a new perspective, one that allows us to face life with hope. This verse also challenges us to let go of control. We often want to figure everything out on our own, carrying weights that we aren't designed to bear. But Jesus tells us that we don't need to do it alone. He is willing to carry our worries, give us strength, and guide us on the right path. The key is to trust Him, to stop fighting the waves, and allow Him to take us to calmer waters. To come to Jesus does not mean that all our problems will magically disappear, but it does mean that we will not face those problems alone. His rest is not an absence of challenges, but a constant presence in the midst of them. He gives us the strength to move forward, the comfort to endure difficulties, and the peace that surpasses all understanding. Come to me also speaks to us of a personal relationship with Jesus. It is not a general, distant, or impersonal calling. It is an invitation to walk with Him, to trust Him, and to experience His love in an intimate and transformative way. This rest He offers is not just for a moment, but for life. It is a rest that renews us, fills us with hope, and prepares us to face each day with a new attitude. If today you feel exhausted, burdened, as if the weight of the world were on your shoulders, listen to these words. Come to me. You don't have to do it all by yourself. Jesus is there waiting for you to give Him your burdens, to trust Him, and to allow Him to give you the rest you so urgently need. His love and power are greater than any weight you may be carrying. Surrender your worries, your fears, your doubts. Lay them at Jesus' feet and experience the peace that only He can provide. In Him you find not only rest, but also strength, hope, and a new life. He doesn't ask you to be perfect. He only asks you to come just as you are with all that you carry, and trust that He has the power to transform your life. In His hands there is always rest, there is always peace, and there is always a new beginning. Psalm 34-17, the righteous cry out, and the Lord hears and delivers them from all their anxieties. This verse is a declaration of God's faithfulness and love towards those who seek Him with a sincere heart. It is a promise of hope for those who face difficult times, reminding us that no matter how dark our circumstances may seem, God is always attentive to our prayers and ready to act on our behalf. Many times we want all the answers before taking the next step, but God calls us simply to trust Him to move forward with the confidence that His hand is holding us, that His love will never fail, and that His justice will always protect us. No matter what you're facing today, God has a plan, and that plan is always for your good. Every time fear tries to stop you, remember this promise. God is with you. No matter how great the challenge, His love is greater. No matter how many times you fall, He will always be there to lift you up. He is your refuge in the storm, your strength in weakness, your help in times of need. His righteous hand is the guarantee that He will never leave you, that He will always be by your side, guiding you, supporting you, and giving you the strength to move forward. Today is the time to let go of fear, to leave your burdens in God's hands, and to move forward with confidence. Do not fear, for He is with you. Do not faint, for He is your God. His help will never fail, His love will never run dry, and His justice will always be your support. God sustains you today and always, and with Him by your side there is nothing that can defeat you. John 16:33. These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have affliction, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Jesus offers us a message filled with power and hope. He speaks the truth without exaggeration or false promises. In this world, we will face tribulation, trials, difficult times that will make us doubt and feel weak. But He gives us a reason to trust, to stand firm, because He has already overcome the world. No matter how severe the storm we face, His victory is the guarantee that there is hope, that we are not alone, and that His peace can carry us through any circumstance. The world is full of uncertainty, problems that seem impossible to solve, moments when we feel that everything is against us. Difficulties are inevitable. Life will test us. But in the middle of all this, Jesus offers us something the world cannot, a peace that goes beyond our circumstances, beyond what we can comprehend. It is a peace that endures even in the midst of the storm, because it is not dependent on what is happening around us, but on God's presence within us. Often, we seek peace in the wrong places. We think we will find it when we resolve all our problems, when we achieve financial stability, when everything is under control. But Jesus reminds us that true peace is not found in the absence of problems, but in His presence, even amidst them. He tells us that in the midst of affliction, in the midst of chaos, we can have peace because He has already conquered. His victory over the world is our greatest source of security. Trusting in Jesus does not mean that we will never face difficulties. It means that despite them, we can be sure He is with us. Sometimes we feel that problems overwhelm us, that we can't go on, that life is too heavy. But Jesus calls us to trust, to believe that His power is greater than any adversity, that His love is stronger than any fear, and that His victory assures us that even though we face trials, we will never be defeated. Life constantly challenges us, and there are days when everything seems to be going wrong, when bad news piles up and we feel like we're on the verge of giving up. But this verse reminds us that we don't have to face it all alone. Jesus has already conquered. His victory over death, over sin, over fear, is our guarantee that we can move forward with confidence no matter what comes our way. He has already made a way for us to live in peace. The peace of Christ is not fragile or temporary. It is strong and everlasting. It does not depend on whether things are going well or badly because it is rooted in His absolute victory. He invites us to rest in this truth, to release our worry, and to embrace the confidence that, no matter how the world tries to shake us, His love and power will always be with us. We can walk securely because we are not alone in the fight. His victory is our strength, His presence is our guide, and His peace is our refuge. Jesus warns us that we will face afflictions, that life will not always be easy, but He gives us a reason to keep moving forward with hope. He tells us to trust, to not let difficulties steal our faith, to always remember that His victory is ours. Storms may come, but they cannot take away the peace He offers. We can be certain that His love sustains us, that His grace is sufficient, and that every trial is simply another step towards His perfect plan for our lives. Every time fear tries to overwhelm us, every time uncertainty threatens to weaken us, let us remember these words. Jesus has already conquered, and that victory is ours. We do not have to live in fear. We do not have to worry about what is to come, because His love covers us, His peace fills us, and His power sustains us. The key is to trust, to believe, and to rest in His promise that no matter what we face, He has already conquered. Today is the time to stop living with anxiety, to release our worries, and to embrace the peace that only Jesus can give. No matter what affliction you're facing, His victory is your security in Him. You can find rest in Him, find strength in Him, and find the certainty that all is well. Trust in Him, for He has overcome the world. Psalms 9:10, "Those who know your name will trust in you, for you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you." These words remind us of an unshakable truth. God never forsakes those who trust in Him. Trusting in God is not merely a choice. It is a natural response for those who have experienced His love, faithfulness, and presence in their lives. Those who know His name, who have witnessed His hand at work, know they can rely on Him in all circumstances because He never fails. When we know God's name, it's not just about knowing what to call Him, but understanding who He truly is. His name represents His character, His love, His justice, and His faithfulness. When we grasp this, our confidence grows because we know that no matter how difficult the situation, He will be there. God is not like the world that offers temporary help or ever-changing promises. He is constant, faithful, and will never leave us. His promise is clear. He will never forsake those who seek Him. There are times in life when we feel as though everything is working against us, when doors seem to close and answers don't come. It's easy to doubt, easy to feel abandoned. But the truth is, God is always working, even when we can't see it. The key is to seek Him with all our hearts, to approach Him with faith, knowing that He will never forsake us. When we seek Him, we find refuge, guidance, and peace amidst chaos. Trusting in God is not just a momentary decision, it is a daily choice. It means giving Him our worries, burdens, and fears, knowing He is in control. It means letting go of anxiety and resting in His promise. God does not abandon His own, He never has, and He never will. History is filled with stories of those who trusted Him and saw His faithfulness manifest in remarkable ways. And that same faithfulness is available to you today. We try to solve things on our own. We trust in our strengths, our resources, and our connections. But only when we return to God and place our trust in Him do we experience true peace. He never disappoints us, never leaves us adrift, never turns away from us. He is always ready to guide us, strengthen us, and show us the right way. To know God's name means to understand that He is our provider, our healer, our refuge, and our strength. It reminds us that no matter what we face, He has the answer. There is no situation too large for Him, no problem He cannot solve, and no heart He cannot restore. Our trust in Him is built day by day through the experience of His love and faithfulness. When we trust in God, we live with a different perspective. We do not let fear take over, nor do we allow circumstances to define our faith. We know that even though everything may seem complicated, He has a perfect plan and is always working in our favor. His love is unwavering, His grace is sufficient, and His presence is constant. No matter how dark the path may be, His light will always guide us. Seeking God is the key to experiencing His faithfulness. It is not just about seeking Him in times of crisis, but about making Him our priority at all times. When we place Him at the center of our lives, everything else finds its place. Our faith grows, our hope is strengthened, and our peace becomes unshakable. He never forsakes us, and His love is the greatest proof that we can trust Him without reservation. Here we find the reason to trust. This is not a distant, indifferent, or unapproachable God. It's a close God who sees you, knows you, and cares about you. His care is not general or impersonal, it's specific and loving. Every detail of your life matters to Him, from your greatest challenges to the things that seem insignificant. Knowing that God cares for us transforms our way of facing life, giving us peace in the midst of chaos and hope in times of uncertainty. This verse challenges us to reflect on how we handle our anxiety. Many times we try to solve everything by ourselves, carrying a weight that we were never meant to bear. But God invites us to trust Him, to leave our burdens in His hands, and to rest in His love. This requires humility because it means recognizing that we don't have all the answers and that we need His help. Cast all your anxiety is not a suggestion. It's a command full of grace. God doesn't want us to live trapped in stress, worry, and fear. His desire is for us to experience the freedom and peace that comes from trusting Him. This act of casting our anxieties on God is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process every day. Every moment we can come to Him with what weighs us down and find in His presence the relief that our souls long for. Because He cares for you, He reminds us of God's faithfulness. His care does not depend on our circumstances or our performance. It is constant, unwavering, and eternal. Even when we do not understand what is happening around us, we can trust that God is working on our behalf. His love is the guarantee that we are never alone in our struggles. This verse also calls us to live with active faith. Casting our anxiety on God does not mean that everything will be resolved immediately, or that we will never face challenges, but it does mean that we are not alone in them. God promises to walk with us, sustain us, and guide us through every trial. By trusting in Him, we find the strength to move forward and the peace to rest. If today you are overwhelmed with anxiety, listen to these words. Cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. God invites you to let go of your worries, to trust in His love, and to experience the peace that only He can give. No matter how great your burden, His love for you is greater. Surrender everything that weighs you down to God. Talk to Him, pour out your heart in prayer, and trust that He is at work in your life. His care is a refuge, a safe place where you can find comfort and hope. Remember that you are not alone. The God of the universe is with you, concerned about you, and willing to carry your burdens. In Him, there is always rest, there is always peace, and there is always a new beginning. Trust in His care and let His love transform your life. Hebrews 10:30, for we know Him who said, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay," says the Lord. And again, the Lord will judge His people. This verse leads us to reflect deeply on God's justice, reminding us that we do not need to take justice into our own hands. God is the supreme judge, perfect in His discernment, and faithful in His execution of righteousness. His promise to take care of what hurts us and what is unjust is a relief to our souls and a reminder that we can fully trust His plan. For we know the one who said, "Mine is vengeance, I will repay." These words echo what God Himself declared in the Old Testament, reaffirming that vengeance does not belong to us. In our humanity, it is easy to feel the impulse to respond to evil with evil, to seek to balance the scales according to our judgment. But this verse teaches us that true justice is not in our hands. God is the one who sees all things from the beginning to the end, who understands the intents of the heart, and who can act justly and perfectly. "I will repay," says the Lord. This is a powerful reminder that God is faithful to His word. His righteousness is neither late nor passive. It will come at the right time and in the perfect way. This invites us to let go of the resentment, anger, and desire for revenge that we often carry, and to leave those burdens in God's hands. His promise is that He will take action, that He will not allow injustice to go unanswered, and that He will do so in His perfect time. The Lord will judge His people. This fragment calls us to deep respect and reverence for God. He is not only the judge of the wicked, but also of His people, those who belong to Him. This is not a cause for fear, but for gratitude, because we know that His judgment is just and full of grace. He reminds us that we are accountable to Him, not only for our actions, but also for the attitudes of our hearts. Instead of focusing on what others have done to us, this verse calls us to examine our relationship with God and make sure we live in a way that honors Him. This passage also teaches us to trust God's plan even when we don't understand why certain things happen. Often, injustices can make us question whether God is really seeing what is going on. But this verse assures us that nothing escapes His knowledge. His judgment is inevitable, and His justice is perfect. It gives us the freedom to focus on living in peace, knowing that God is at work in the background. "Mine is vengeance" is also a call to live with compassion. By understanding that justice is in God's hands, we can let go of the desire to hurt others and instead choose the path of forgiveness and grace. This does not mean that we approve of unjust actions, but that we trust that God will take care of it far more effectively than we could. If today you are struggling with the desire to take justice into your own hands, this verse is for you. God invites you to let go of that burden and trust that He will do the right thing at the right time. His judgment does not fail, and His timing is perfect. In the meantime, you can rest in His promise, knowing that He does not ignore what you are facing. This passage also reminds us that God's justice is not only about punishment, but also about restoration. He not only corrects the wrong, but also heals the wounded, restores what has been lost, and gives peace to those who trust in Him. By leaving vengeance in His hands, we not only free others, but also free ourselves from the burden of resentment. The Lord, for His justice is perfect, does not want us to fight our battles alone or bear the weight of vengeance. God has promised to take care of everything, and His word never fails. Rest in His promise, live in peace, and let Him be the judge, for His righteousness will always prevail. Isaiah 43:18-19. Remember not the things of the past, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. This passage is a profound reminder of God's transforming nature, of His ability to do the impossible, and of His call to leave behind the past and embrace the hope-filled future He has planned for us. Do not remember the things of the past, nor consider the things of old. This is a call to let go of the weight of the past, not to get caught up in what was, whether good or bad. Often our lives are limited because we continue to hold on to past hurts, failures, or even successes. But God tells us not to look back, not to allow the old to define what He is about to do. Letting go does not mean ignoring what happened, but freeing ourselves of the power that those experiences have over us to open us to the new that He is preparing. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Here is the promise that changes everything. God not only restores, but also creates something entirely new. His work is not limited to repairing what is broken. He gives us a fresh beginning, something that did not exist before. This statement fills us with hope because it assures us that no matter how things look now, God is working in the background to bring something wonderful. He does not stay in the past or leave us stagnant. He invites us to move forward in faith toward what is to come. Soon it will come to light. You will not know it. God assures us that this new work is not in a distant and unattainable future. It is near, ready to manifest. Yet He also challenges us to be vigilant, not to become lost in what He is doing. Sometimes our worries and distractions prevent us from seeing God's work in our lives. This verse calls us to open the eyes of faith, to actively seek His hand in every situation, and to recognize His presence in the new things He is creating. Again, I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. Not fearing evil does not mean we do not see it or feel it. It means we know in whom we have placed our trust. It means that even if the enemy surrounds us, even though circumstances seem to be against us, our faith remains firm because we know that God will not leave us alone. The security of His presence strengthens us, sustains us, and gives us the courage to keep going, even when everything within us wants to surrender. His rod and His staff infuse us with encouragement. The tools that shepherds use to guide and protect their sheep, the rod, represents their protection, their power to keep us away from danger, to defend us from any threat. The staff represents their guidance, their constant direction, their loving control to keep us on the right path. God is not only with us, but He guides us with wisdom, protects us from dangers we do not see, and assures us that every step we take is under His watchful eye. When we cross our own dark valleys, fear whispers that we are alone, that there is no way out, that the situation will overwhelm us. But the truth is that God walks by our side. He does not observe us from a distance. He is present, holding us, speaking to us, giving us the strength we need to move forward. His love surrounds us at every step, and His grace sustains us even when we feel that we cannot take it anymore. There is no valley so deep that His light cannot illuminate, nor shadow so dense that His presence cannot dissipate. The world teaches us to fear, to worry, to depend on our own strength to move forward, but this verse calls us to trust, to rest in the certainty that no matter what we face, God is with us. We can walk securely with our heads held high because we are not alone in the battle. He guides us with love, protects us with His power, and gives us the courage to move forward. Each of us faces different valleys. It may be a loss, an illness, a difficult financial situation, family problems, uncertainty about the future, but the promise remains the same. God is with you. He sustains you, strengthens you, fills you with hope. When you feel that there is no way out, You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to trust that His presence is enough to carry you through any circumstance. The valley is not the end of the road, it is just a stage. God takes us through it not to leave us trapped, but to strengthen us, to show us His faithfulness, to teach us to depend completely on Him. And when we reach the other side, we will look back and realize that His presence was what sustained us in every moment of weakness. His rod protected us, His staff guided us, and His love sustained us. Today, you may be going through your own valley of shadow, but fear not. God is with you. His presence is real, His love is sufficient, and His protection is unwavering. Lift up your gaze, keep moving forward in faith, for at the end of the valley there is light, there is victory, there is hope. His rod and His staff will breathe encouragement into you. His love will sustain you, and His grace will carry you farther than you ever imagined. Lamentations 3:22-23. Through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed, because His compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. These words are a reminder that in spite of our failures, our mistakes, and the difficult circumstances we face, God remains faithful. His mercy is what sustains us, enabling us to rise each day with a new opportunity, with renewed hope, knowing that His love never fails. No matter how dark the day before may have been, today His mercies are new, ready to restore us, strengthen us, and guide us. Life is filled with difficult times, with trials that make us feel exhausted, situations that make us question whether we can keep going. But this verse assures us that we are not alone, that we have not been consumed by adversity because God's love covers us. He sustains us even when we feel that everything is lost. His mercy is constant, it is never exhausted, it has no limits. God does not treat us according to what we deserve, but according to His infinite love and unwavering grace. Every morning is a new opportunity to experience His love, to leave behind the weight of yesterday, and walk with the certainty that He gives us a new beginning. No matter how many times we have failed, no matter how many wrong decisions we have made, His mercy reaches us again and again. God does not condemn us or reject us. He gives us the opportunity to rise up, to correct our path, and to move forward with hope. His faithfulness is so great that He never leaves us alone. He never abandons us, and He always gives us what we need at the perfect time. Many times we feel unworthy of His love. We carry the guilt and weight of the past, thinking that we've gone too far, that our failures are too great. But God reminds us that His mercy is greater than any mistake, that His love is stronger than any failure. He calls us to draw near, to receive His grace, trusting that each day brings a new opportunity to start fresh, to live purposefully, and to experience His faithfulness in all areas of our lives. God's faithfulness does not depend on our circumstances or our behavior. It is part of His nature. He is constant. He is unchanging. He remains faithful even when we are not. He continues to love us even when we stray. He continues to care for us even when we do not see Him. His faithfulness surrounds us, protects us, and drives us forward with confidence, knowing that God is faithful. His faithfulness gives us the certainty that we can face any challenge, any difficult season, because He is with us, providing, guiding, and strengthening our hearts. Every day we wake up is a proof of His mercy. Every opportunity we have to breathe, to live, to love is a sign of His infinite love. We worry about the future, so we try to control what we cannot. But God reminds us that His mercy is new every morning. He has everything under control, and His faithfulness accompanies us every step of the way. We do not have to live in fear or uncertainty, because we can trust that His love never runs out. God is a God of second chances, of inexhaustible grace, and of love without conditions. No matter what you have done, no matter how far you feel you are, His mercy is available to you. Today, His faithfulness does not change. It does not weaken. It is not broken. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and that gives us the assurance that we can trust Him with all our being, with every area of our life, with every dream, with every fear. Today is the day to remember that we are not alone, that His mercy surrounds us, that His love surrounds us, that we are not alone. He holds us, and His faithfulness is our greatest strength. No matter what you face, God is faithful. No matter how great the challenge, His love is enough. Rise up with confidence, receive His mercy, allow His faithfulness to fill your heart with hope, and walk in the certainty that He will never leave you. 1 Peter 5, verse 7, cast all your anxiety on Him, for He cares for you. How many times have we felt overwhelmed by worries, by the weight of life, by the uncertainties that lie ahead? Day after day, we cling to our problems, carrying them like a heavy load that steals our peace, takes away our joy, and fills us with fear. But God offers us a clear and powerful invitation. Let go of that burden. Give it to me because I care for you. You don't have to carry the weight of your own life, your worries. You don't have to wear yourself out trying to fix everything, because I am here to support you. Anxiety is like a shadow that chases us, whispering lies to us, making us think that we are alone, that no one understands us, that there is no way out. But the truth is that we are not alone. We never have been. God is attentive to every detail of our life, to every tear, to every thought that steals our peace. He not only sees our struggle, but offers us a solution. He says, "Give it all to me." Not some things, not only what seems impossible, but all your anxiety, all your worries, your fears, your doubts. He asks us to stop fighting alone and give Him what weighs us down. God does not want us to live burdened with worries that we cannot control. He wants us to live confidently, knowing that His love and His power are enough to sustain us. But sometimes we struggle to let go. We have difficulty trusting fully, wanting to be in control, wanting to figure everything out on our own, and that's where we get exhausted, frustrated, and feel like nothing changes. But when we choose to surrender our anxiety to God, we experience something different, something the world cannot offer. Peace that surpasses all understanding,